Hi everybody, welcome back. So I'm here with Olivia Wong from MTR Corporation, and I wanted to kind of draw from your unique experience from a DEI perspective. And first, I guess for our learners, although we've talked about it a bit, like what it is, but more specifically, what it means to you and what it means to MTR. Because I think every company, there isn't like a legal definition for this yet, and maybe eventually, as we get more quantitative with like social metrics, like we have for on the sustainability side or governance side, maybe those things will maybe be like crystallized a little bit and defined from a regulatory or policy standpoint. But I think there's a lot of maybe like license where people can kind of define DEI for themselves and for the organization. So what does it mean to you, and what are some ways that MTR has integrated DEI principles and concepts into your business model?
Okay, so then DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and now people begin belonging, and so it's a little bit of kind of an alphabet soup, but I think ultimately, what it really means is the ability to bring in people, to really kind of harnessing people of diverse background and thinking about how they can actually contribute, but also building an environment where they feel that they actually want to contribute. They feel that strong sense that where this is the place where I can call home. And that's generally how I would look at things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging. And I think often it also can be very specific to the organizations that you work in. And so within MTR, for example, I would even also bring in the concept of respect. And I think that's really key. I think often, people, when they think about, like when people are very different, we're going to argue, we're going to debate, so then so maybe that's not a good thing, in a company, we should just all be, kind of getting on and, have a harmony and, being harmonious and that kind of things. And that's perfectly fine. But I think that ultimately what it really means is that it is actually okay. I think, we are all different. Even in a family, you're not going to go and think and speak and, believe in the same thing. But it's the idea of respecting each other's different opinion. And I think that's really key. And so I think from MTR's perspective, when we think about, in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and thinking about, what an inclusive workplace look like, it's really thinking about how it is that we can respect people of difference, respect each of us bringing a different expertise, having different backgrounds, and having different in terms of life experience, and how we can bring that together within this environment where we then can create something even greater. I think on a really practical level, I think often people say, well, DEI is a nice to have. What does it really mean, in organizations? Why should I really care about it? I think one of the first things I would tell people is that, well, why you should care about it is because you need people to work for you.
Yeah.
I think until the day that, the robot will take over the world where you do not require human beings at all, you're going to need people to work in organizations. And you're going to want them to make sure that they want to come to work for you as well. And I think that often when we think about diversity as well is that we want to then be able to say, okay, so then how can we make sure that we expand that kind of talent pool, making sure that we can bring in people of different backgrounds to come and work in a company. Because also one of the things that the beauty of diversity is that you make sure that you don't have groupthink. I think often when we see organizations that may get in trouble is when they have people that are exactly the same and start to think alike, and then they start having a lot of blind spots and not able to actually realize it. So the beauty again of having that kind of diversity is actually bringing in that kind of different thoughts and different thinking, and then having that sense of respecting each other's opinion, making sure that people actually can speak up, and then actually making sure that we can mitigate a lot of the risk that's out there before it happens, because we are able to have those kind of conversations because people feel that they can actually speak up and do a lot, in terms of creating that sort of safe environment and actually creating that space where they can actually point out issues that are there. And I think one more thing that I think is also important is that the reality is people often say that, the younger generation as well, that's kind of what they expect. That's what they're being taught in school. Often when we, talk about diversity, with the younger those that are fresh graduates coming out, they're kind of going, why are you still talking about it?
Yeah.
I mean, I have friends, that are from school that are different, and that's not a big deal. That's how we all grew up, And so I think these are the kind of things that where we also have to understand on a practical level, you do want to make sure that you expand your talent pool, bring in diverse talent, and on the same hand is that the younger generation, that's what they expect. When they come into an organization, they think that this is actually a given. You shouldn't have to be talking about bringing in diverse talent because, well, we all are different, we all are diverse. And, and we got to also make sure that we remember is that, individuals, talented individuals also can choose. If they see in organizations that do not make them feel a sense of belonging, do not make them feel that they are being included and they are not respected, they don't actually have to work for you. They can walk out of your organization tomorrow.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So for those that aren't as familiar with Hong Kong, it's a very diverse place. We welcome in tens of millions of people from around the world every single year. So people that ride MTR, they may not be Hong Kong residents, but they're literally from all over the world. I think internally, though, we refer to Hong Kong as Asia's global city. But I think maybe the cynical among us often say that Hong Kong, although we do a good job of living near each other, we don't necessarily do a great job of integrating these different communities, or at least we can do better. And I'm curious from that standpoint about the integration of the workforce, right? Because I think that's increasingly necessary. And Hong Kong has the added advantage or disadvantage, depending on how you look at it, of multiple mother tongues being spoken. So you have local Cantonese, increasingly a lot of Mandarin speakers, obviously English, but then you have a lot of the ethnically diverse community here that maybe English is one of their first languages, but they also might speak maybe a South Asian language or dialect, etc. And I'm assuming with the changes in our demographics here, that means that you're having to increasingly draw from other populations. And so I'm just curious, like internally, how do you integrate that? I imagine companies might be struggling with that around the world, but specifically in Hong Kong.
Yeah. So I'm so excited that you asked that question because so I think one of the first thing is that often if you ask people, why is that, you don't bring in a more diverse workforce? It's not because they don't want to. It's because they are afraid. As they will often say, well, like if they are of a different ethnic background or if they're differently able, I don't know what it is, what can I say? Will I say the wrong things? Will I offend them? And I don't understand their culture. So I think one of the things that we've done actually in MTR is that we do a lot of pilot programs. And we think that's often one of the best way in terms of helping individuals and also helping managers to kind of get over that fear. Recently, we introduced a program called Empower Z. So the idea is that we wanted to bring in people of different ethnic backgrounds or people with disabilities and give them an opportunity. So often they don't have the same opportunities. Either is because they don't know that opportunity is available to them, or secondly is that because often organizations may overlook these talents. And so that we specifically created a program. We said that we wanted to make sure that we're able to offer opportunities for these individuals, for them to come into the workplace and really see what it is like to work in a corporate. And they are all extremely talented. They are all university graduates with really strong different disciplines and functions that's applicable to the workplace and to MTR specifically. So we bring them in. So now before we do that, what we do is that we also realize that one of the things is we want to make sure that from a recruitment perspective, are we asking the right questions?
Yeah.
Are we able to then understand the individual that's in front of us? What would be the right way in terms of helping them to get the best out of that interview so then they are not being disadvantaged by some of the preconceived or unconscious bias that we may have. So we actually do trainings for our HR business partners, for our hiring managers that's eventually going to take on these individuals. We call them trainees, but they really are already graduated from universities. And then we also assign buddies for them. So then, so help them to navigate, because often this could be the first time they actually work in a corporate, maybe even have never done an internship during university's days. So that we actually making sure that even before they join, that we prepare our organizations and these individuals to understand what it is that can help them to integrate and bring these individuals in. And as we bring our trainees in, we also offer them a lot of trainings as well. Trainings in terms of understanding what it is like to be in a corporate, how to do presentations, and then bringing in once we recruited them in the beginning, is that we bring in the mentors, the hiring managers, and actually having workshops together so they can build a relationship.
Yeah.
We do a lot of events and activities where we make sure that we bring in these cohorts, but also bring their managers in as well, and do things like sports activities. Sports is always a great way. You don't really need a lot of, in terms of language, you can pretty much do anything, and just kind of bring people together, and that's brilliant. And so I think these are the kind of things that where you feel that by having these kind of pilots and then collecting these data, making sure that we can then demonstrate and say, hey, you know what, you may be uncertain in terms of whether this is going to be work. Now we're going to do a pilot program, we're going to demonstrate to you, and we will continue to learn from these programs and pivot. So we make sure that we're able to eventually, without actually having to have a program, that our hiring managers, our HR business partners will say, you know what, we should make sure that we're able to truly embrace people of diverse background, and having that kind of recruitment that anyone can come in and they can feel like, wow, like this is, MTR is really a place that where they truly walk the talk. They really are inclusive. And I think, again, having these sort of pilots, because, often one of the questions we also get asked is, we often ask, people of these sort of different backgrounds, say, hey, how come you didn't think about applying to MTR before? And often they say, well, actually, I wasn't sure whether, I would be welcome. I haven't really seen anybody that looks like me. And we realize, oh, wait a minute, we actually do have people that are different. And we need to really kind of demonstrate and showcase and talk more about what it is that we do. And so hopefully these kind of programs that we do, we're also very open to sharing our learning with other organizations. Because again, we don't really see this as a competitive advantage. We see this as actually creating a basic foundations where it is just creating a level playing field. If every organizations in Hong Kong actually can do something like this, effectively, we don't need to create a specific program. We all know that there are diverse talent out there. We should all be fighting for those talents.
Just as a quick anecdote around that. So I do a lot of work in the NGO space, and over the past few years in particular, the Hong Kong government, because we do have a large and growing ethnic minority population, and simultaneously demographically, like the more traditional kind of local Chinese population tends to not be growing at the same rate. And so there's a lot of push at kind of the government level to integrate more. And so a very substantial amount of money was actually put towards the NGO sector to encourage organizations to hire more ethnically diverse employees for things like social responsibility and other types of NGO roles. And one of my NGOs did a very quick analysis of the organizations they selected, and we noticed that none of them had any board members that were ethnically diverse. They didn't have any managers or people that were going to be the direct supervisors that were ethnically diverse. They didn't have English language websites. They didn't have any of the infrastructure or management or policies, the things you just described, in place. And so we immediately reached out to the government department that was providing this funding, and we're like, this is going to be a massive failure if you don't work with organizations that already have these procedures in place, where they have people who look like them, they can speak to them, they share that same kind of cultural background and experience. And unfortunately, as a result, it was not, I would argue, a very successful program, and most of the placements didn't last very long. It ended up being like a huge waste of money. And so I think this is a great lesson about, again, DEI, yes, it's an acronym just to make the concept simpler, but the reality is we live in an increasingly diverse world. Demographics are causing populations to shift everywhere, and talent acquisition and retention is one of the most costly elements of in terms of what companies face, in terms of either things that go well and drive revenue, or lost opportunity and lost revenue as a result of the inefficiency of having to retrain and rehire people. So I think it's a great lesson. It's good to hear that things are going well there at MTR, but I think it's just one thing that hopefully we can all internalize as you move forward in your own organizations.